In this video, we'll be taking a peek behind the curtain to see how I load my chunk-based world streaming tiles. Welcome to my devlog. As a professional creative, I've been using 3ds Max for a very long time. And whilst the UK can't afford to hire anyone, I'm filling my days as a solo indie game dev. Recently, I released Combat Search Rescue on the MetaQuest, and now I'm prototyping a game for release on Steam. For the size of the game I want to make, I've realised I'm going to need chunk-based world streaming to be able to get the performance I need and include everything in there. So let's take a look at where I'm up to right now. When the curtains open, it reveals my loading screen. I can choose an empty slot, and this is the bit I've been working on. So it lays out all the tiles, then it creates vector 3 positions for all the trees, which we don't see in the scene, but we can see in the console. The vector 3 coordinates are then raycast down to a ground. When it hits a ground tile, it takes note of which tile it is, and then it sends the point to that tile, and that tile saves it in its own list. Once all that's happened, each tile is then told to generate the trees based on all the points it's been given and saved in its list. Once that's done, all the tiles are hidden, and then the culling system decides which tiles should be shown again. Once that's all in place, the curtains open, and the game is revealed to the player. So I'm still learning C#, and instead of designing this, because I don't really know how to design architecture, the system grew out of the skills I had. So I'd work on a bit here, work on a bit there, and eventually I made it work. So now that I've got the system working and I'm happy with it, I've designed this flowchart so I can take a step back and see how it actually works. And I have no idea whether this is a good implementation or not, because I've not seen any other implementations. This is all kind of what I've worked out using the skills in C# that I have already. So we start here with the empty game object, which is the level, and it's got a couple of scripts on it. First script, world building coordinator, takes control of everything. First of all, it looks, is there a file? Do I need to generate one? And if there's no file, it goes this way, and it runs the first script, which is the world chunk spawning. This puts the ground tiles into the game and gets them ready to receive the data. Each ground tile looks after its own prefabs of trees and rocks and whatever else is going to be on that tile. So the first thing it does is it accesses the file world chunk data static class. This is the class that is responsible for the I/O. It asks it to either load or create a list, and then it gives it access to the list, and the world chunk spawning knows how many chunks it needs to create. So the first thing it does is it goes chunk 0, 0. It fetches the prefab of ground from the pool, assigns it its chunk ID, which is very important because that's how my save system works. It all works on these chunk IDs. So now the prefab knows what chunk it's from. Then it moves on to the next one. 01 fetches the next ground tile and assigns it the same integer. And it works through all of them until it's put all the ground tiles in place. Once that's finished, that gets then saved back to a list that can be accessed or stored whenever it's called. So now that's done, we move on to this, random tree locations. So the random tree locations is literally just generating random vector 3s throughout the whole scene at a certain height above it. And then it raycasts down from that point until it hits a tile. And then on that hit point, it extracts what tile number it's from, and then it sends that vector 3 coordinate of the position on that tile to the actual tile. So if it goes down and hits chunk 4, it finds chunk 4, sends the vector 3, which is then stored on a class called the local tree manager, and it has just a list of tree locations, just vector 3s. It doesn't have to be trees, it can be anything that I want: asteroids, rocks, crabs, scorpions, highland cows, aliens, whatever. They are just vector 3s that are getting stored in a list. Once the lists are done for every tile, we move on to the next bit, which is the chunk manager. So the chunk manager fetches the list and it runs a for each loop for every trunk, and on every chunk it says grow new trees. So it will go off, the first chunk 0, 0, goes to the local tree manager and says begin forestation. And the begin forestation uses that list of vector 3s and it just fetches prefabs from the pool, puts them into the scene using those vector 3 coordinates. Now each prefab from the pool has this entry savable pool prefabs class, which is responsible for everything to do with the pooling, so sending it and fetching it from the pool, resetting the physics, and also creating the save data. It knows what save data it needs to store, and it puts it in a save data struct, and then it takes that save data struct and sends it to this static class, file prefabs per chunk, which is the I/O for all the savable objects that sit on top of the chunk, and it saves a file per chunk. So each chunk can go, what prefabs do I need to load and save at this, and it's got access to it. Now, let's say we are on chunk 0, 1, and it's begin the forestation, and it's fetched all the pool prefabs from the pool. They all generate their save data, they all send it, they say, hi, I'm from chunk 0, 1, here's my save data, and that gets put in a list next to the integer for that chunk in a dictionary. So there's a dictionary that holds lists for each chunk, and each of those gets saved to a file of their own, so the chunk can just call its save data and say, what do I have that I need to display on the screen? And it can just fetch the prefabs from the pool or put them back. So now let's take a quick look at what happens when you load the scene, because it's slightly different, and it's also what the culling manager uses. So back to the world building coordinator. Do I need to generate? Is there a file there? There is a file, so I don't need to generate. Then it goes, let's run this first. So rebuild from save data is the first thing it does. And what that does is it goes to the I/O, which is this one, and it says load the level, fetches a JSON file. The JSON is then converted back into the list that it can use. It also stores the list here. And then we fetch the prefab. So it says fetch prefab 0. The ground is fetched. It's assigned it's 0, 0. And it'll work through each one in turn, putting them into place based on the saved data. Once that's done, we move on to the chunk manager, and the chunk manager accesses the list again, and it does a for each loop on each chunk again and says chunk 0, 0, load your trees. So then it nips off to its I/O for the prefabs, says I'm chunk 0, 0, can I have my save data list please? Puts it back in here, and the save data list is stored on the local tree manager. And it will then work on the next one, 0, 1, 0, 1. May I have my list please? This is 0, 1. May I have my save data? Yes. Gets sent back, stored on its own class. Once it's done all the chunks, which I could have from anything from 1 to as many as I want, theoretically, I don't know the limit, but I'm going to find out, aren't I? At some point. Once all of that's done and they've all loaded their lists, they're ready. It then invokes the event that we've built the world. So then the culling manager works out where the player is from the player save data, which is this one, which has got the vector 3 coordinates and the rotations for the player's position. And then it decides which chunks need to be shown to hold that player in that place. So maybe it's chunks 3, 4 and 5. It will say on 3, 4 and 5, oh 3, show the trees, which then that fetches all the prefabs from the pool based on the list it has. And then it will ask 04, 04, show the trees, which will then fetch all the prefabs from the pool based on this list, and so on. When the player moves through the scene and chunk 3 is no longer needed, it will then go chunk 3, hide the trees, and then this will then push all the prefabs back to the pool. So the chunk manager, when it calls the tree manager, it's not calling the tree manager direct, it's got an interface on it. And the interface is this one, iColorable, which has just got this state machine on it that says, send me the desired state, and then a callback to what to do after it's completed. So the callbacks are something new that I've just learned, which is really nice and really useful. I wish I had that in the first game I made, but I don't know what I don't know. I've been using structs a lot. I didn't use structs at all, I think, in the last game. So I'm really getting my head around structs. I'm really enjoying that. And interfaces, I think I had one interface that I put in the last game. And that was right at the end. I had this problem and I was doing some research. How am I going to solve this problem? And the interface was the answer. And I can really see the power and the use for interfaces now. So I'm trying to use them where necessary. Sometimes I'm using them in places where they're not necessary. But that's just down to lack of experience on my part. So that's where we're up to. I don't know what's next. There's a list a mile long and I'll choose something and I'll work on some bits, and then when I've got something to show, there'll be another video. Meanwhile, for the previous game, it's still on sale on the MetaQuest. I have discovered there's a try before you buy option, which I didn't see before, or maybe it's new, I don't know, but I've activated that. So if you want to try the game, you get a 15-minute window to play it. If you get that try before you buy. And also, starting on the 17th of April 2026, it's on sale, 50% off in their April sale, I think they call it. And that's 10 days, 50% off. If you see this video and it's no longer April 2026, you can still have a discount. Go to combatsearchrescue.com, which is the website that I own for that game. On there is a contact. Just contact me and say, I saw this video, you said I could have a discount, please may I have my discount, and I will generate you a coupon. I found I can generate coupons. So I can send you a coupon, especially for you, for your personal discount. So everybody gets a discount if you see the video. That's it till next time, see you then.